he broke his back when he was 19 years old. He owned a moving company, fell off a third floor balcony onto a second story overhang, broke his back. Some quack doctor prescribed whatever it is, the oxys or Percocet, whatever the synthetic opiate is. Sammy gets hooked on it, and they're saying there's one in every family now. He goes to prison, and I asked him, I said, Sam, do the people in prison that you meet in prison, do they belong there? And Sammy said, none of them belong here the first time, which I thought was really telling. But at each one of them, once they go to prison the first time, gets criminalized, and then they come out, and then now they belong in prison because you've given them access, and you give them resources, and you give them peers, and people to learn from. But it's just a bunch of nonviolent victimless crimes that we then lock up and put in this animal factory to set loose on society and then go make real trouble.
You're doing the cold plunge stuff now, if I'm not mistaken. Why do you do? What's that about? Why are you doing that?
I have some health issues. I have mercury poisoning. My brother and I both have it.
Okay.
Mercury is one of the most toxic things that can be in the human body. It's more toxic than radiation. Chances are I've had it my whole life. Okay. And it causes like really extreme issues. Neurological disorders are the scariest ones. Bone density loss, joint pain, massive fatigue, like just all the, like your whole body just basically starts to shut down. And this started for me about 15 years ago, and I didn't know what it was. And the only way I could manage it, especially the fatigue, that's the part that would kill an entrepreneur, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
The only way I could manage it is through habits. And so I got really addicted to habit formation. Okay. And I track my whole habit journey on Instagram. If anybody's interested, I post every single morning my habit stack, which is pretty extreme. I wake up at 4:00 in the morning, and then I work out, and I do my deep work, and I do my sauna, and I do my cold plunge. And the cold plunge is the newest major addition. And I started doing it once a weekend at a place here in Phoenix called Optimize because there's a PubMed study. I bet you I can find it here.
Okay.
There was a guy in the 1800s, an illiterate farmer, who was able to cure people of mercury toxicity using cold water exposure.
Huh.
His name was Vincent Presnitz. And it was in 1842. And there was a lot of mercury toxicity back in the day because mercury was used for a lot of things from an industrial perspective. If you ever heard of Mad Hatter's disease, that's what Mad Hatter's disease is, mercury poisoning. And you go crazy. Like you it's eating your brain, literally. People with mercury toxicity's brain mass is decreased by 20 to 30% by the time they die. And getting it out is dangerous. The guy who invented the currently commonly accepted form of chelation, his name's Andy Cutler. His books are back right behind me. Cutler died at 60 because he over-chelated himself. So mercury is so dangerous to have in your bloodstream that your body stores it in your cells and your bones and your bone marrow and your organs. So like my mercury, the doctors think is in my brain. My brother's is in his spine. And when you try to take it out, you need to put enough in your bloodstream to where it's, a relevant amount for you to chelate and then capture using a binder, but not so much that you shut things down. And so it's this real horrible balance. And then while you're going through your detox, you feel horrible all the time. Like you've known me for, I think, 1.5 years or 2 years now, Matt. You've never seen me without a headache, not once.
That's right.
Now it's varying degrees of headache. And I have varying degrees of capabilities. We played basketball once, and I don't know if you remember this, but I almost took out Phil Stutz.
I do.
And it's because when I run, I feel like my head is in a fishbowl. And so I just needed to leave the basketball court. So anyway, all that to say, the only thing I could do to manage this was habituate my actions. And the cold plunge, it helped my symptoms. I've tested since starting, and it hasn't helped my toxicity.
Okay.
But it's helped at least, especially the pain. It's helped the pain. For 90 minutes after the cold plunge, I don't feel...
This is just one more puzzle piece that is connecting in my brain today. Check this out. In the last 60 days, a dear friend and client recommended I read a book. I got this book called Empire of Pain. I'd never heard of the Sackler family before. And I read this book. It's like 500 or 600 pages. I read it in like 2 weeks, just can't put it down. And then oddly enough, the show Painkiller comes out on Netflix. Like at the exact day that I finish it, this show called Painkiller comes out. Have you heard of the show? It's about the pharma industry. It's fascinating about this. And then my friend says, you should listen to this book by RFK, the guy that's running for a Democrat president. It's about real Anthony Fauci. It's like 2 years ago, right? And I've heard of it. I never read it or listened to it. And I listened to it for about 15 hours over my trip over the weekend. And now you're talking about this, and the FDA 20 years ago happens to be Fauci was in charge 20 years ago, and now back to pharma. So all of these things come out, or all of them are just causing me to ask more questions. Without any judgment, just curiosity. And it's interesting when you get to a place where you get shut down, no more questions are allowed. To me, that is
Yep.
where the
Where the
poop
truth
is.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the truth or the poop. That's where the stuff is. And you're able to talk about it, and I appreciate and respect you for being able to have conversation and share things. Well, what
Yeah.
we
My
didn't
little
talk
brother,
about. Oh, please, your little brother.
well, I was, my brother was, he spent 5 years in prison and 5 years on the streets. He broke his back when he was 19 years old. He owned a moving company, fell off a third floor balcony onto a second story overhang, broke his back. Some quack doctor prescribed whatever it is, the oxys or
Mhm,
Percocet, whatever the synthetic opiate is.
mhm,
Sammy gets hooked on it, and they're saying there's one in every family now.
mm,
He goes to prison, and I asked him, I said, Sam, do the people in prison that you meet in prison, do they belong there? And Sammy said, none of them belong here the first time,
mm.
which I thought was really telling. But each one of them, once they go to prison the first time, gets criminalized, and then they come out, and then now they belong in prison because you've given them access, and you give them resources, and you give them peers, and people to learn from. But it's just a bunch of nonviolent victimless
Ah,
crimes that we then lock up and put in this animal factory to set loose on society, and then go make real trouble.
mm. Man, sorry to hear
He's
that.
better,
How's your
still a
brother doing
struggle,
now? Is he?
but a lot better. He's been out for
Yeah,
4 years, I think. He's brilliant. He's a
yeah.
160 IQ. He's the smartest person I've ever known in my entire life. Um, just got caught, on the
Mm.
wrong side of being able to manage pain.
When the day that he got out, or the day that you got to see him physically and embrace him, what was
Dude, it
that
was
like for you when
interesting
you got a chance to
because,
see him?
I remember a little skinny heroin addict going in. He comes out of prison and he is he looked like Achilles, just perfectly sculpted. And all he
Wow.
did in prison was work out and read. And so if you ever, if you ever talk to my little brother, man, there's nobody more devastatingly intelligent, articulate, well-spoken. And because, he came from this other realm of life, he was on a 4-yard, that's where you are with the murderers. And he wasn't in protective custody,
Hmm.
which is where we'll call them the pansies in prison go. And so you've got a dude that can actually handle himself, and uh, he's not who you'd expect on either side of that
Yeah.
aisle. It's just he's like a philosophical thug. He's just an anomaly, dude. He's impossible to describe. He's absolutely impossible to describe. And what's really funny about Sammy too is he's so gentle and he's so kind and he's so empathic. But then you put somebody like that in
Mm.
situations like he was in, a meat grinder, and they come out ground. So